You are worth roughly $250 million, yet every Tuesday at 6:15 a.m., you slide onto the same cracked vinyl stool inside the greasy diner off Highway 18. You wear a faded high school hoodie with frayed sleeves and order scrambled eggs, wheat toast, and black coffee. Brenda quietly refills your mug before you ask. She assumes you just finished another overnight shift at the local Amazon fulfillment center and refuses to charge you for the second refill out of pity. You thank her, leave an ordinary tip, and never correct the story. Nobody in the diner knows your wealth is spread across operating companies, commercial real estate, and private investments. They cannot see the ownership structure connecting everything beneath the surface. They only see another tired customer eating breakfast before sunrise. That difference is the point. Most people believe wealth announces itself with watches, cars, and oversized houses. Real wealth often removes the need to be noticed at all. It becomes quieter as it grows because attention creates friction, and friction attracts unnecessary problems. This is not an accident. This is architecture. What you're looking at didn't begin with millions of dollars, expensive advisors, or complicated legal diagrams. It began at absolute zero, when you owned nothing, had nothing to protect, and spent every day trying to build a business that could survive another month. Before there was wealth, there was structure waiting to be earned. Level 1. $0 to the first operating company. You started with nothing. No savings, no investors, no wealthy relatives, no backup plan. The only thing you owned was the willingness to knock on another warehouse door after another rejection. You chose to build a commercial warehouse repair and maintenance business because every distribution center eventually needed something repaired, replaced, or reinforced. The first jobs were unremarkable: replacing damaged loading dock bumpers, repairing cracked concrete, installing steel safety rails, sealing leaking roofs. Every estimate was another chance to convince strangers that an unknown contractor deserved their trust. Most said no. A few said yes. Those few kept the business alive. Cash flow never matched the work completed. Materials were purchased before invoices were paid. Fuel, insurance, rented equipment, and payroll demanded money before profit ever appeared. Some weeks your business account dropped below $100 while waiting 30 days for customers to pay. You answered every phone call yourself, inspected every finished job yourself, and solved every complaint yourself. Slowly, property managers remembered your name. Warehouse owners recommended you to neighboring facilities. Repeat customers replaced cold calls. Revenue became predictable instead of accidental. Eventually, the company owned trucks, equipment, active contracts, and dependable cash flow. For the first time, the business could survive a difficult month without collapsing. You believed learning how to make money was the hardest challenge. You had no idea the next challenge would be protecting everything the business had finally earned. Before the next expansion, the business has to evolve from earning money to protecting it. Level 2. The holding company is born. The first operating company solved one problem. It proved you could build a profitable business from nothing. It also created a new problem. The trucks had value. The equipment had value. The contracts had value. If something went wrong, everything you had spent years building could be exposed. That realization led you to Arthur, a 62-year-old tax attorney charging $350 an hour from an unremarkable brick office behind a neighborhood strip mall. He wore $15 drugstore reading glasses with one arm held together by clear tape. Nothing about him suggested extraordinary expertise until he started asking questions. He never asked how much revenue you wanted. He asked who owned your assets. He never asked about your next customer. He asked what would happen if your largest customer sued tomorrow. Arthur pulled out a yellow legal pad and sketched a simple diagram. The operating company would continue serving customers, hiring employees, and signing contracts. Above it would sit a separate holding company. It would own the operating business instead of performing the work itself. One company would create risk. The other would own value. The drawing looked almost disappointingly simple. You left his office and spent the following weeks restructuring everything. Nothing changed for your customers, yet everything changed underneath. For the first time, you stopped thinking like a business owner. You started thinking like someone building something designed to survive for decades. Level 3. Building the structure. The holding company changed the way every future decision was made. Instead of expanding inside one growing business, you began adding separate companies with separate responsibilities. The original operating company continued repairing warehouses. A second company specialized in commercial renovations. Later, another focused on long-term facility maintenance contracts. Each business had its own bank account, insurance policies, employees, and financial records. The same discipline extended beyond the operating companies. When you purchased your first commercial warehouse, Arthur insisted it should never sit inside the contracting business. A separate real estate entity acquired the property. The operating company became a tenant, paying rent under a written lease like any unrelated business would. It felt unnecessary at first. Years later, it became obvious. Profits gradually flowed upward instead of remaining trapped inside businesses exposed to everyday risk. The holding company accumulated ownership while each subsidiary concentrated on its specific job. Success was no longer measured by how much revenue one company generated. It was measured by how resilient the entire structure became. From the outside, almost nothing appeared different. Customers still saw the same trucks arriving before sunrise. Vendors still mailed invoices. Employees still received paychecks every other Friday. Hidden beneath those ordinary routines, ownership had become carefully separated from operations. The businesses continued growing, but the real achievement was no longer expansion alone. It was building a structure capable of protecting tomorrow's opportunities before they ever became tomorrow's problems, through patience, discipline, and deliberate separation. Around the same time your companies were quietly expanding, Tanner seemed impossible to ignore. You remembered him from business school, where he talked confidently about scaling fast, raising venture capital, and building a personal brand before building a durable business. Years later, his social media looked exactly as he imagined. Every morning featured another LinkedIn post about discipline. Every month featured another photograph beside a leased matte black G-Wagon. Investors saw private dinners, rooftop events, luxury hotels, and motivational speeches. Maintaining that image cost nearly $15,000 every month, but appearances had become part of the business model. Your life moved in the opposite direction. The trucks carrying your company logo accumulated more attention than you ever did. You drove practical vehicles, wore ordinary clothes, and avoided conversations about net worth. Most people assumed the companies were successful. Almost nobody guessed how much they actually owned. The difference wasn't personality, it was philosophy. Tanner treated attention like an asset. You treated attention like a liability. Every unnecessary headline, photograph, or public display invited curiosity from competitors, opportunists, and people searching for deep pockets. Quiet ownership reduced unnecessary friction before it ever appeared. Years later, your balance sheet told one story, while Tanner's lifestyle told another. His image required constant spending to remain convincing. Your structure required almost nothing except disciplined maintenance. One approach depended on continuous applause. The other depended on quiet compounding. The louder Tanner became, the less you wanted anyone remembering your name. Your younger brother, Mark, never cared about holding companies, asset protection, or ownership charts. He worked as an electrician, left home before sunrise, and measured success by whether he could provide for his wife and 2 young children. Then a ruptured disc in his back forced him off the job for 3 months. The paychecks stopped almost immediately. Medical bills didn't. Out-of-pocket insurance deductibles arrived alongside the mortgage, utility bills, and groceries. Every envelope on the kitchen table represented another decision that couldn't be postponed. Mark never asked you for money. He only admitted he wasn't sure how long they could keep everything together. You didn't arrive with a speech about financial discipline. You didn't lecture him about planning ahead. You quietly transferred enough money to cover the deductibles, caught up the mortgage payments, and made sure the children's routines never changed. The conversation stayed inside the family. Nothing appeared online. No photographs documented the moment. No charitable announcement followed. Driving home afterward, you realized the holding company had never been the destination. It was simply a tool. The legal entities, separate ownership, and carefully built structure existed for moments exactly like this. They created stability long before stability was needed. Money had become quieter as it grew, but its purpose had become clearer. Real wealth wasn't measured by what strangers believed you owned. It was measured by how calmly you could solve someone else's worst day without asking for recognition in return. The real test arrived without warning. A commercial contractor involved in a warehouse renovation project filed a $1.8 million lawsuit after a dispute over delays, change orders, and project responsibility. The complaint didn't stop with the operating company. It named you personally, claiming the court should pierce the corporate veil and allow your personal assets to satisfy any judgment. Years earlier, that accusation would have kept you awake every night. Now it changed almost nothing. Arthur gathered the operating agreements, meeting records, lease documents, insurance policies, and corporate resolutions that had been maintained from the beginning. Every company had respected its own boundaries. Separate bank accounts were never mixed. Contracts were signed by the correct entity. Rent was paid under written agreements. Decisions were documented instead of assumed. The lawsuit still demanded time, attorneys, and patience. Legal defense is never pleasant, no matter how prepared you are. But the structure performed exactly as intended. The dispute remained where it belonged, instead of spreading through everything else you owned. Walking out of Arthur's office, you understood something that balance sheets never reveal. Building wealth is impressive. Building a system capable of surviving an attack without sacrificing everything beside it is far rarer. That quiet resilience was the asset you had truly spent years creating. Now you're standing in aisle 14 at Lowe's holding a $14 smoke detector and a box of drywall anchors while reading the latest consolidated quarterly summary on your phone. Hundreds of millions in assets sit behind names most shoppers will never recognize. Nobody looks twice. Nobody asks questions. That quiet anonymity is the final reward. The holding company was never built to impress strangers. It was built to protect businesses, preserve opportunities, absorb setbacks, and create peace that compounds long after money stops being the goal. The architecture remains invisible because it was always supposed to.